you doing? Sometimes you're all kissy and sometimes you're not. All right, most of you are. Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to your Daily Penguin. This is our tour through my Penguin Classic wall. I thought you'd want a glimpse of Frida after so long. We're going book by book and author by author, and today we're at a familiar face. We're at Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass. This is a tiny little thing, mainly because this is an alternate. It's a selection of just the one phenomenon of Walt Whitman, the first version of this tiny collection of poems that he did in 1855, where he did a huge amount of the setup work himself. He didn't sign it. There was no name on it. He sent out review copies, what we would now consider review copies. It was a relatively small print run, and he, from 1855 on, he tinkered with this for 40 years. Expanding it, changing it, altering, sometimes spending a whole week or a whole month to alter one line. And this Penguin Classic is the original 1855 version, close to. And it has a great introduction by Malcolm Cowley, who's fantastic to read. And I found this when I was going through the Penguin wall. I'm not planning these daily Penguins ahead of time. So what I find is what I find. And I found this as the next Penguin. And saw that it illustrated, I don't know if you could call it a problem. I wouldn't know I would explicitly call it a problem, except that it leads to a problem, which is overcrowding. All of those shelves, almost all of them, are double stacked. And I don't want that. I don't want to have to dig and bury and shove stuff around in order to find what I'm looking for. An ideal Penguin wall like that would be every book in its place, every book needing to be there. And this does not explicitly need to be there. We have already seen Walt Whitman in a Penguin Classic, and that was this. That was the complete poems. And this complete poem, much, much bigger, includes the 1855 version of Leaves of Grass. So the whole of this, minus the Malcolm Cowley introduction, is in this book. And I have the Malcolm Cowley introduction in the portable Malcolm Cowley. So I don't need to have it in this book in order to have it. Period. So there is actually, aside from the fact that sometimes you just want one work, sometimes you just want to read one work, and it's neat that Penguin would put out the original Leaves of Grass, and it's neat that they would pair it with a great essay. And sometimes that's all you want. It's just that first lightning in a bottle type thing that hit the American scene. That I believe that first edition of Leaves of Grass is intensely collectible and probably very valuable. It's probably something that Jason Harrigan, Byways in Brooklyn, has observed or held at auction. It's probably something that Mark Richardson of Richardson Reads has found at a Vermont yard sale for $1 or whatever. But not often. It's sometimes that you want to do that, but it's not often. I don't go to poetry often enough. Even Walt Whitman, the gigantic body, the gigantic corpus of poetry that this slim work eventually became is one of my favorite works of poetry in the American canon. Although I don't think poets should be quite encouraged or, I don't know, allowed to go at their older work like this. I've never liked that. Just write something else rather than continuing to tinker with your book and leaving nightmarish text history behind for future critics and bibliographers and whatnot. But I don't know that I love that first edition of Leaves of Grass enough that I need it alone when I can have it in this collected volume. And then there's also this, which I had to grab off the shelf because this is the Whitman that I go to most often. It's this thing. It's this gorgeous Leaves of Grass, great big fat thing. So you know it's not the 1855 version. Instead, this is the 1892 version, Whitman's so-called deathbed version, which he said he preferred above all others, but only because it was the last one he was able to do. If he'd been able to do another one, he would have preferred the later one to this. This is much, much expanded, and he went over it lovingly. I'm not saying that is beneath consideration. And certainly this is, for its amplitude, for its poetic vision, I prefer this version to the 1855 version. So when I am in the mood for Whitman, I often don't go to the Penguin Wall at all. I often go to this thing. I don't need notes for Whitman, so I would never go to them for this. And if I'm going to go to a Whitman edition for the Malcolm Colley essay, well, then I have a bunch of Malcolm Colley essays on the bookcase of books about books. So yeah, I don't need to find it in this edition. So it underscores that your Penguin today, of course, is a recommend. You should, if you, as I mentioned when we looked at the complete Whitman, if you're an American, you should read Leaves of Grass. If you're an American, I think if you're a bookish American, you should know Leaves of Grass, not just read it, because it did a lot to change the artistic dialogue of your country. But it underscores tactical consideration, I guess you could call it, with the Penguin Wall, which is that I have to be careful about what kind of duplication I do, what kind of deadweight I have, heretical though it is to say. And the simple truth is that the non-Penguin version, I also have the Viking Portable Walt Whitman somewhere in a mass market paperback, and it has the 1855 song Leaves of Grass. So I don't know that I need this. And I'm not 100% sure that I need the complete Walt Whitman. I'm not sure that I need a Penguin Classic Walt Whitman, but I certainly don't need two, or if you count the Viking Portable Library, 3. So this is just part of an ongoing conversation with the Penguin Classic Wall to try and get it under control by the end of the year, which is hurtling upon us. So that's your Penguin for today. Is the original Leaves of Grass, the 1855 Leaves of Grass, the one that Whitman knew the printers, and he did a lot of the typesetting himself, and he made a strange little volume. And of course the book critic in me is immensely gratified by the fact that this is a pure, probably in America, one of the most famous examples of a book that was made by a blurb. that Emerson, he sent a copy to Ralph Waldo Emerson, who largely inspired it in its sensibilities, and Emerson loved it, called it out of nowhere. I myself hold the somewhat minority view that Emerson didn't read it, but I'm not saying that you couldn't have these opinions if you did read it, but I don't think that Emerson did. The timing looks odd to me of his, but his reaction to it was astounding praise, prescient praise. He predicted that it was a great American classic that had suddenly been born in our midst, and that helped the book a lot. Emerson, as we saw when we touched on him in the Daily Penguin, Emerson was a literary god for a long time in America. So the short version is a little late for the short version, but the short version is that your Penguin today is recommend the Leaves of Grass. You don't need a Penguin Classic to do this. You could get this, the 1855 version, I'm sure, will stand alone at Project Gutenberg and other places. It's a slim thing, so it's easy to download. But I'm not sure. I mean, I strongly recommend it. You should definitely read it. I'm privately behind the scenes for myself. I need to figure out how much Walt Whitman I want and how much of it needs to be in this room. I guess tactically, probably the best answer would be to keep the complete Whitman, since it has everything. But how often do I go to anything for Whitman that isn't in this volume? Hardly ever. I go to this volume all the time. So I will figure it out. So that's your Daily Penguin for today, and we'll see what we encounter tomorrow. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.